is be true to what you said on paper.
I wish that I could freely dream and be judged from within, hunted by a power that cannot see past my skin. My views are viewed as ignorant, my truth always denied. My history is shrouded in a spider web of lies. Isn't this America? Or is this America all a lie?
Of the freedom of speech, somewhere I read. Of the freedom of press, somewhere I read. That the greatness of America is the right to protest far right.
I pledge allegiance to a country built on lies. Or raise my children to believe they're equal in its eyes. My leaders are assassinated for speaking their mind.
Welcome back to At the Round Table with MAMLEO. I'm your host, Institute. My brother's favorite, my co-host. To my right, Rhodes Scholar, Rhodes Pierre is in here. And the doctor is with us for a few more minutes. Dr. Brown.
The brother already calling it, huh?
Listen, I got to post. Get it down where you can. And we want to thank our sponsor, the Money Store. Who says money doesn't grow on trees? Well, it does. And if you need a mortgage, give branch manager Carl Holbrook a call at area code 508-345-4276. That's 508-345-4276. So, folks, if you haven't been paying attention, and clearly a lot of folks don't pay attention to what's going on in the world, things that really impact them, politics, right? I know it's not sexy, like, what's going on with P. Diddy and all this other stuff. And, the feds just cut the interest rates a 0.5 point. So we figured we wanted to get our experts back in to tell folks what that means and, what they should be doing and get them some advice and what direction they might want to take if they've been on the fence about buying a home or refinancing. Is now the time to do it. So we have coming in our sponsor, Cora Holbrook, will be in shortly. But on the line is Jared Wilt from the Skull and Wilt Group Compass and Frank Mancino. And you're right, Pastor Hobbs. I cannot read your handwriting. What is it?
From the Money Store.
From the Money Store. Okay. All right. Can I buy a vowel? Gentlemen, if you would mind. Sure. We got to have fun, right? Jared, well, if you would mind introducing yourself to our audience, please, sir.
Yeah, hey, good morning, guys. My name is Jared Wilk. I work at Compass. I manage a team called the Shulkin Wilk Group, but also hold the capacity right now. I'm the president this year of the Greater Boston Association of Realtors. So I have the distinction of being able to have a lot of communication with people inside Boston, around Boston, 64 communities surrounding. So happy to talk about anything going on that I can help with.
All right. And Frank Mancino, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what is your title, sir?
I am the divisional vice president for the Money Store, covering basically the entire East Coast from Maine to Florida.
Oh, wow. Maine to Florida.
Well, we got an executive here.
we do. We don't tell anybody.
We got the guy that signs the checks.
Yeah, we got to talk to him.
I'm waiting for that tree to grow in my house, too.
That's just a little something we came up for you guys. We're working on an official sponsor, but we had to transition from the previous one. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. So, folks, and I'll start with you, Frank, because you're in the mortgage business. The Feds just lowered the rate by 0.5%. And so, on average, if you have good credit, where are you looking at right now as far as mortgage rates across the board. Well, let's look with the money store. What's the current prime for a mortgage, a 30-year mortgage today with you guys?
Well, it's a loaded question, right? Only because to answer that completely, you'd need to have a credit profile. But generally speaking, we are.
We keep losing. Do we lose? Frank?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't know if it's something on your end. We didn't get any of that. You said,
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So you said generally speaking. So let's say someone who has good credit. We're in the 750 to 800 range, right? I know there's different various fractions of how you're going to be. Let's say someone at the top echelon with very good credit. Where are we looking at if you're?
So the range right now is probably in the low 6s, maybe even upper 5% range.
Okay, upper 5%. So
yeah, and that is off of rates that hit almost 8%.
So okay, so has that factored and filtered down? Because I know it takes time for it to catch up. So are banks adjusting their rates and mortgage companies adjusting their rates on the prime? Was it going to take a while for that to seep in?
There is a trickle down effect, Larry. Basically, what happens is when the Fed cuts rates, they're cutting bank-to-bank lending rates, consumer rates, technically. That affects car loans, student loans, home equity lines of credit, consumer finance rates, and then gradually, as the money filters into the system, the mortgage rates start to follow down, and that is actually happening.
So I know you guys are in the giving out mortgages. Is this a good time, or should people be waiting? Because there's some talk that the Feds may be doing another rate cut sometime in December before the end of the year. So if you're looking at buying, should people wait a little while, or if they're ready to go? I guess it depends on what they can afford, right? Because if this rate goes into effect at 0.5%, that's considerable for some folks who are on the margin, right? Like it may be a couple $100, and that may be the difference between also for them being qualified for a mortgage. Is that a fair statement?
It's 100% correct, and it's the magic question as to when is the best time to buy. So it's less expensive today rate-wise to buy than it was a year ago.
Okay.
And if rates continue to go down, obviously it would be less expensive mortgage-wise. The question is, will sale prices rise or fall in conjunction with that? Yeah. So, the age-old question, and I think you have a real estate agent on the line, is the best time to buy is always now.
Yeah.
But frankly, it's less expensive today, mortgage-wise, to buy than it was a year ago. Is actually the answer to the question.
Okay. And Jared, with that being said, I would agree to some regard to what Frank is saying, but because the prices of homes have gone up, like Boston, there's it's close to $1 million to buy a home in the city of Boston. So even if the rates are at say 6%. When you factor in that down payment and what your monthly payment is going to be, even at 6%, it seems like it's out of reach for a lot of people. What's your advice to folks who are looking to purchase? Clearly Boston is, but are you saying they maybe need to branch out a little bit? I know we've had you on before, and you've kind of said to folks maybe it may not be your most desirable area you want to be in, but it may be the one that you can afford. Does that still apply today?
Yeah, it does. It really does. And I think, as you said, prices are in the nine. The median sale price at the end of August was $915,000. That's for a single-family home. Median condo was just over $700,000.
Wow.
And as Larry said, mortgage rates are down. The cost to buy is actually down on a monthly basis, not your down payment, because those prices have come up year over year, with the exception of condos going down 1% in 19. Over the past 10 plus years, they've gone up every single year. So it becomes a question of A, what can you afford? B, where do you want to be? And C, where should you be? Or where can you be? Because as you just said, we all know where we want to be. We also know what we want in a home, but what's the most realistic option? And the challenge is that for some people, it's really all about where they are and, what they want as opposed to what they need and where makes the most sense. And that's when you have people that, I find that a lot of people who are renting rather than buying, in their minds, and this is not everyone, but a lot of people in their minds, it's because they don't think they can afford to buy a home because they're looking at what their neighbor's house sold for and saying, I can't afford that. But as you just said, if you start looking a little bit further out, you get away from the city. Obviously, some towns are more expensive than others. Some are more expensive than Boston. But by and large, there are communities where those prices do start to get a little more affordable than the last town over. Then the next one's a little more affordable. So you just gotta. It's a question of what are you willing. Where are you willing to be, and what are you willing to sacrifice in the home, right? So I always talk to people at the very beginning about what are your wants versus what are your needs in a home, and I really want 3 bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms, but I really need 2 beds, 1.5 bathrooms, and I really want my own big backyard fenced in, but I need an outdoor space to put a grill or just somewhere that my dog can go to the bathroom. So it's personal, it's individual, and it's a question of those wants versus needs, but what are you willing to potentially sacrifice?
6 months.
Larry, can I add to that too, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's an exercise that we do called a cost of waiting. What is the cost of waiting to buy? And you take today's interest rate, you take today's sale price, and then you project out where you think the sale price or the value of that property will be a year, 2 years, 3 years out. And the cost of waiting always seems to show that buying today is better than buying tomorrow, whether the interest rates are lower. Because if you look back a year or two, you would have gained a tremendous amount of equity if you can afford the house that you're trying to buy.
So that's a great point. So with that said, let's take that $915,000 price range, gentlemen, and I'm looking to buy that now, and I work for the city. Okay, I'm going to use me. I'm a police officer, so I'm not going to probably qualify for the type of programs that a lot of people may be able to get to offset some of that cost. I've got to put down 20%. I'm looking at probably a $6,000 a month mortgage, and that seems to be out of the reach of folks. And on top of that, I'm probably paying $3,000. If I'm renting, I'm paying at least $3,000 a month, and that's probably for 1 bedroom. So how do I get in that? And also, Jared, are we still seeing people paying over asking price for these homes, or is that kind of leveled off to where there's a little bit more negotiating room? Because I know supply and demand, and there still doesn't seem to be a lot in the supply chain. I know there's a lot threw out there, so take it any way you like.
Yeah, that's it. It's the inventory, and I'll get more into that. But yes, we are still seeing, in some instances, bidding wars going over asking price. We're seeing, in some instances, houses sit on the market for a little while and sell them for less. That's where the value of working with and listening to or communicating with your realtor, have a listing broker, to come up with the right strategy, the right, what's the best way to get my house shown in its best presentation. Is there any, touch-up paint we need to do? Is there any fixing of anything we should do before we list the house? But the homes that I'm seeing that are a little more turnkey than others, but B, that are priced properly, those are going quickly. And we're seeing homes that are overpriced. So I've been working in real estate 20 years, and before I started working with my dad and my stepmother, who were in the industry for, I was doing for 50 years. And the mindset that they were always used to was, you price this a little high because someone's going to come in and negotiate. Right. You're leaving yourself some wiggle room. So if I'm working with a seller right now who's been in their house for 20, 30 years, that's what they know. That's what makes sense to them. And explaining, and I'm going to use that just for sake of argument, a $900,000 price. If your home is worth roughly $900,000, it makes sense to list this house at $899, $875, somewhere in that range, as opposed to $950 or $1 million, because if it sits on the market in this on-demand instant gratification world we're in, if it sits on the market for 10 days, it's stale. And after that second or third week, people are like, well, this has been on the market for months already, right? And it hasn't. And then you got to do a price drop. And if you do a price adjustment, people are saying, oh, wow, yeah, there's something wrong with the house. Whereas, no, it was just a strategic decision to try and price it a little more aggressively. So there really is a lot of strategy that goes into pricing, but you're also working on the psychology, on the psyche of buyers in today's world, which is very different than what it was, not even pre-COVID, but I would say Amazon Prime, if you will. Right. But when people didn't need everything, weren't accustomed to everything happening so instantaneously.
Right. So, Frank, with that said, if I'm pre-qualified for a $900,000, and as Jared alluded to, the houses are still going over the asking price, does that affect people's qualification? Like, if you approve them for a certain amount and they're going in and they want to lock in for more than you approved them, would that disqualify the loan, or how do you work with that?
Technically, the answer is yes. I mean, okay. The idea is to always tell someone or give someone the facts of what they actually qualify, the maximum that they qualify for under every circumstance you can think of, and then hopefully they buy at or below that number, right? Mm-hmm. So you can guarantee that approval and close the loan. When it comes in where they are looking above their actual price range, their actual buying power, then you have to come up with some kind of plan B if they continue to pursue that line, meaning, do you have extra money to put down that you didn't tell me? Are you getting a gift from a family member? Did you come into more income that I don't know about? How do you plan to afford something that technically you can't afford? So we try to establish that with the buyer that, hey, this, based on today's facts, the income, the assets, the credit you have today, the environment that you're looking in, the sale price range that you're interested in, the taxes that are involved, is there any association fees? Taking all that in consideration, if they step over that line, technically I won't be able to help them unless something's changed that I'm not aware of. So we try to really educate our buyers to make sure that they understand that line, the demarcation line, and that they stay at or below it under every circumstance possible.
Right. So that's why having you folks on is so important, because these are the areas where people kind of get caught. They get caught up in the house and they want it, and it's like going to that auction and then you bid more than you should have, and then you realize you may not have the funds, or you're going to have to deplete it somewhere or try to find it somewhere else. And like you said, I know since the last time when we had that financial crisis in the mortgages, they've really tightened up areas where it was a little bit loose and allowing people to just kind of work their way through it and look the other way, knowing that the disaster was coming where this house was most likely going to end up in foreclosure. Now that's not easy, because but to, as Jared was saying, that most of these houses are going for above asking price. How do you work with the buyer? You just explained a little bit of it, but how do you work with the buyer who is trying to buy that home, who has basically said, this is all I have, but now the house is $20,000-$30,000 more? Is that just a done deal? It's over. You got to find something which you qualify.
Yeah, I wish I had a real answer to that question. I mean, it's an ongoing issue that we have every single day. But what really we try to do before all that happens, when you're talking to a buyer, when you're evaluating their buying power, pre-approving them, there's really two ways of doing it, and this is what we do. It's what I've done my entire career, almost 40 years, by the way. Is what do you want to spend per month, and what will that buy you? And then what's your maximum buying power, and what will that buy you? And hopefully they come in somewhere in between that and not over that line. Because really, if they go over that maximum buying power, there's really nothing I can do. I can't approve a loan that's not approvable. And as you said, our industry took a massive shot to the jaw after 2007 by approving people that maybe didn't actually qualify. So now, we check, the income is checked 6 ways from Sunday, the assets are checked, the credit's analyzed, and basically when we give that max number, that is the max number.
So Frank, and I'm gonna get to you, Jared. Frank, so when someone gets, because I think people get confused when they get a pre-approval that somehow that everything's done and they're gonna get the mortgage. Can you explain to people what a pre-approval means and the steps that come after that a little bit more? Because a lot of people think, oh, I'm all set, because a pre-approval, it's almost like a soft look at you, and it didn't get all the paperwork, everything. Nothing is etched in stone, but a lot of people get that confused with, I've got a mortgage.
Yeah, that's a great question, and something that every buyer really needs to understand. So I'll explain it this way. A true pre-approval, a real pre-approval, and I can't speak for every company that issues a pre-approval, but a true pre-approval is when the income is checked, meaning I've looked at your W-2s, your pay stubs, your scenario. I've seen your assets. I've seen 2 months' worth of bank statements. I've ran an up-to-date credit, and merging those three items tells me that you will be approved if you stay in this price range with these taxes and this kind of, if there's any association fee, if it's a condo or townhouse, that condo or townhouse is an approvable property. So a true pre-approval has actually analyzed and been seen as a range that we will lend you in. Mm. You can also do something called a pre-qualification, which means, tell me your income, tell me your assets. I might even want a credit, or tell me your debts, and I'll figure out a number that makes sense. That's what you get online. If you go online and says, you could buy $1 million house, but no one's checking anything. Mm. So a true pre-approval is when everything is looked at and a lender feels very comfortable in the price range it's looking at, that you will meet those, that you will continue with that criteria, that nothing will change, and if you buy in this price range, you'll be approved and close on the loan.
And Jared, that same question to you, because how do you deal with the customer that comes to you with this pre-approval, but you really don't have all the background on where their finances are, and they're looking at a house that's at the max and it's probably going to go for above asking price? How do you get them to be realistic about what they can afford?
Yeah, we really try to have that conversation early on, make sure they've been pre-approved, that you're sort of vetting them, right? I think that when someone's very early on in their process, and they say, well, we're really not going to start looking until the spring. We just want to kind of start getting our ducks in a row. We're going to go to some open houses. We'll talk with the lender. My recommendation is talk with that lender before you go look at anything. And the biggest problem is, and I'm just, that $900,000 number came up before, so I'll kind of roll with that. But the problem is if your budget's $900,000 and they look at something that's on the market for $1.2 million, they're gonna love it. and everything that they look at for 900 and under is gonna pale in comparison to that. Now, when you get into a wild market, I'll call it a air quote spring market, but the way that we've had for a long time, since COVID and a little bit beyond before that. If you've got a $900,000 budget, my recommendation is don't look at anything for more than that. Mm-hmm. And when it's really wild out there, there was a period where 80, 90% of these homes were selling over asking price, and your average sale price was 102, 103, 105% of asking price in some towns, even 10% over in some areas. Yeah. So at that point, you're telling people, if you got a $900,000 budget, we shouldn't be looking at anything over $800,000 or $750,000, unless, as I said before, things kind of get stale quickly. There's a strategy that some people have that they're not going to win a bidding war, right? Yeah. Because, by the way, to win a bidding war, when it's really wild out there, it's not just the dollar amount, it's the terms. Mm-hmm. And some people aren't willing to drop certain contingencies. They're not, their terms outside of the dollar amounts are not going to be as competitive. So what we start doing is we say, listen, anything that's been on the market for a week or more, that's when we're going to go look at them. Because after that week, it's highly unlikely that it's going over the asking price. It's highly unlikely that there's going to be a wild bidding war. We're not the only people with this strategy. There could be homes that still get 2 or 3 offers, But if it's asking $899, I doubt it's going for over 900, maybe 910. Mm-hmm. Whereas a week earlier, you got to be afraid that that's going to 950 or $1 million. Mm-hmm. But again, as I said earlier, right now we are still seeing some bidding wars, some houses over asking price, but it's not as much as it was in the spring. It's not as much as it's been the past few years. Personally, I believe that's seasonal. I don't think the market's changing. I think it's, or I don't think it's turning into a buyer's market. I think it's sort of beginning to normalize. Mm-hmm. It's an election year. It's always, some people who are saying, well, what's going on. But, the Fed cutting the rate at the beginning of the top of this hour, what we talked about, that's playing a role in getting some buyers definitely rethinking off the sidelines and ready to, at the very least, start those calls with Frank and I.
I would also say that Jared probably would agree with this point that you try and work with lenders that that you have a history with, that and when they issue a pre-approval, that it's valid and you can bank on that. I mean that's an important part. We try to make sure that we speak to the buyer's agent up front, let them know what's happening as much as we're allowed to talk about as far as financial information, but make sure that the agent understands completely what the buyer's situation is and how he arrived at that sell price, so that there's no miscommunication about selling them something they can't afford.
Roger. Spot on. Yeah, Frank. Yeah, to that point, we absolutely, personally, I like to work with local lenders, but if it's someone like Frank that's Massachusetts to Florida, great. That's almost even better, especially when you have someone who's moving from out of state. But yeah, someone who knows Massachusetts, someone who knows, they don't need to know the real estate market intimately, but they need to understand the terminology. They need to know that a loan, that Massachusetts is a different process than California, for example, with, where, just the escrow process, the title process, it's a different breed, it's a different animal. Yeah. But we want someone that we can speak with, that we know it's real, and there's some of these, online platforms that some buyers want to call. They see the advertising, it's easy, and I need someone I can speak with. Right. I need someone that I know they're real. I know someone that I can reach on Sunday afternoon when we're writing an offer and we need an updated pre-approval, or I want someone that's going to be reliable, reputable, that the listing agent is going to, A, recognize their name and their bank, but B, that maybe is going to be willing to get on the call with not only me, the buyer's agent, but the seller's agent, and tell the seller's agent, I've been working with these buyers for X amount of months, I've reviewed A, B, and C, and they are highly qualified. And let me tell you, we've vetted them in this capacity and that, and you have as much confidence as I have with my X amount of years of experience. Right. So it's very important to choose the right lender.
It is. And Rhodes had a question for you.
I don't know if can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
All right, great. And I've not been too familiar with mortgages, and so I've heard terms like ARM 3, 5, 7, or where people have mortgages for 15, 20, 30 years. Can you explain the difference between the ARM 3 and the difference between a mortgage for 15 and 20 or 30 years?
Sure. Well, we'll start with the fixed rate mortgage. That's the most popular and the most common. So you have terms of the length of the loan. 15, 20, 30 years. That's the amount of time you're allowed to pay it back, and that's what the payment's based on. So if you have a 30-year fixed-rate mortgage, that loan will pay off in 30 years if you make the required monthly payments from month 1 to month 360. You will pay that loan off in 30 years. Same for 20 years, same for 15 years. The rate will not change. It's a fixed-rate loan. Okay. When you get into an ARM, and the ARM is an acronym for adjustable rate mortgage,
okay.
Then you have terms of an adjustable, meaning it could be fixed for 1 year, change every year. It could be fixed for 3 years. It could be fixed for 5 years, or fixed for 7 years. That means after a certain time period, that loan will change. It will adjust in the market, and that's all terminology within the loan itself, depending on the loan, where you have an adjustable rate mortgage, a rate that can go up or down into the future. And those loans are really designed for someone who says, hey, I'm not going to be in this house for 30 years. I'm going to be in this house for 3 years or 5 years or 7 years. And for that risk, I can take a lower start rate and hope that I'm not there too long where the rate might go up into the future. And those are less used in today's market, but they come and go when the economy kind of warrants that type of loan. Right now, it's almost 100% fixed rate mortgage market,
right. And
because the rates are lower. But,
and to that point,
that could change.
Right, historically, because these rates that we're seeing now are really even at the 6-7% rate. I mean, when I bought my first home, I had good credit. My interest rate was 10%, but the cost of housing was a lot cheaper. And if you didn't have good credit, it was around 17-18%. I know I'm going back to the Stone Age, but people don't understand it. But because of the price of housing being so expensive now, even these rates seem like they're not low enough for people to be able to afford them, because the opposite now, if you had a 6% rate, for instance, my first home was $125,000, this would be spectacular. I'd be paying probably about $500 a month for a mortgage. But that's not the case now, so that's where we have lower rates, but we have higher prices, and they're not even offsetting. They're really out of whack for most people. To get. I know Cora has joined us. Thank you, Cora. Welcome to the roundtable. So,
good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, I just want to ask you one quick question, and I want to bring Cora into the conversation. How is this changes in how the selling and I forget the proper term, where now you don't have to the percentages wise are not shared with the seller and the buyer, and how that affects, if it's affecting. I know it's been only in place for a short period of time, where before people say the rate was 6% of the sale price. I'm just using that number, and then that was divided up. Now, if I'm selling my home, I only have to engage with the seller, and then the buyer has to figure out if someone's going to bring a buyer to me. Is that changing how things are done in the real estate business? It seems like a huge change.
Okay, yeah. So just to give a little background for the listeners to understand really what's going on. So you're talking now commission and how your real estate agents are paid.
Right.
So basically, something that went into effect on August 17th this year, there was a settlement between the National Association of Realtors with a group. There was an antitrust lawsuit in Missouri, and after that settlement, there was basically an agreement that affected the entire 1.5 million realtors involved with the NAR, National Association of Realtors. And what this did was it decoupled the buyer broker commission and the seller's commission. In the past, historically, now, commissions have technically always been negotiable, but there's been very customarily what was done is that if you hire someone to sell your house, a listing broker, you are paying X%. And you just mentioned 6%, which I'll be honest, I've been doing this 20 years. I've never gotten 6%, but it's a number that is definitely common in some states. Not Massachusetts as much as others, but that's the number that got caught up in the headlines. And anyway, so if you pay you pay 1 percentage price to the listing broker. They then will put it on MLS, the multiple listing service, which is where all the information transfers to the different websites that you're using: Zillow, Redfin, Realtor.com, whatever. And anytime that a buyer brings a buyer broker, the listing broker is offering out a co-broke, which is usually half of that number, but it doesn't have to be. Sometimes 1%, 2%, 3%. 2.5%. It can be any of those numbers. Again, always it should have been historically negotiable and understood in a contract between the seller and their agent as to what was going to be offered out to the buyer's broker. And the seller was so again, seller's paying the listing broker is then paying the buyer's broker. Now, they've decoupled that, meaning they've separated that. So the seller only has to pay their own broker, and a buyer can pay their own broker. The challenge is that if you're a buyer and you are buying a $1 million home, and you have an agreement, a contract with your broker, whether you're paying them 1%, 2%, 3%, it's going to be, that's That's an extra $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And a lot of buyers don't have that. And if they do have that, it may affect how much money they're able to put down or what they're able to qualify with Frank for that loan. So we are still seeing, there was a lot of fear, a lot of talk about this. It's been a month and a half. Business does not seem to have changed drastically. Now it is, we are seeing a lot of sellers are still willing to pay that buyer broker commission. However, to be clear, the seller is now paying, in those instances, the seller's paying their broker X%. They're offering out to the buyer's broker Y%. The big difference on top of this is that in MLS, if your brokerage is part of the National Association of Realtors settlement agreement, that there is not, it's not allowed to be listed in MLS what that buyer broker commission is. So if it's not allowed to be in MLS, then sometimes you don't know. The buyer's saying, all right, well, am I paying you? Is the seller paying you? So there's just a lot more conversation happening between the brokers. But it's really important, and Frank, you can talk to this, because I was speaking with a lender the other day who said that it's affecting the pre-approval rates arguably more than it's affecting what we're actually seeing in the field. Because, again, I'm still seeing sellers pay it for the most part, but that buyer has to be able to pay it just in case they can't.
Yeah, Larry, to qualify what Jared's saying is, so when we're pre-approving a buyer, they have not found a property yet. They might be working with a listing agent, or a selling agent, a buyer's agent, but they haven't found a house yet. So at that point, we have no idea if the buyer is going to be responsible for paying their agent a commission, or if they're going to negotiate it with the seller and have the seller pay it. So technically, we have to account for a potential percentage over and above the anticipated down payment and closing costs, and calculate that into a pre-approval. And
that's a game changer.
As Jared said, it absolutely could affect that buyer's ability to buy in that range or take the mortgage that they truly desire. So we're kind of working all through that. The original intent of this entire lawsuit, and the idea and the reason why they kind of won, was they were challenging that the houses were overpriced in order to pay both the seller and buyer's agent commission. And in the end, it was an accepted practice for forever. My entire career, that's the way it was. And now, the perception is, okay, am I overpaying for the house, or am I paying more than the house than I should, so that the seller can pay my buyer's commission? And the answer is no. It was always baked into that pie, but now it's just been kind of laid bare.
Cora wanted to weigh in on that as well.
Yes. Well, what we're seeing nowadays on purchase and sale agreements, it's already stipulated the percentage that the seller would be paying the commission of the buyer agent. Yeah, because buyers are already struggling to come up with the down payment and closing cost, and now you still have to bake in. What most buyer agents are doing they're now negotiating upfront what they're going to be, if the seller is going to pay them, and more often than not, they're being paid, and it's already on the purchase and sale agreement and on the offer. It's on the offer first, and then it's also rolled into the. So
what Frank was saying and what Jared was saying is that they're not seeing much difference on their end, and it really is affecting the mortgage more than, because the person buying it, if that's not written into it, they have to now figure out how to come up with that, and then, but that correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is that can be factored in, but it has to be factored in up front as to where that cost is going to come from. That seems like it also could affect the person being qualifying for the loan, because if the seller is selling the house for $900,000, and then that money is going to go to the seller now, just all of that normally would be paid in those proceeds. Now that is incumbent upon the buyer to come up with what the seller would have been most likely, with the broker, the realtor on the other side selling the home, would be splitting that with the other realtor that brought the customer to them. Now you guys on the mortgage side have to find out if all that's been resolved ahead of time.
Well, of course, the first thing that we review once there's an accepted offer is, of course, the commission, if it's being rolled into, if the seller is paying for it. But what I'm seeing nowadays, I have had several accepted offers, and they're all baked in. The commission of the buyer agent is paid by the seller.
Yeah. So also,
So
when
if in case it happens,
yeah.
well, that would, Frank, help me with this. We can always, like what Frank was saying, we can always, accommodate the buyer paid commission, but there will be a consequence on higher interest rate. Because,
Sure.
like interest is like any other goods. You pay for a price in order to get a loan, right? So that's the interest. So, yeah, but it's not supposed to be, there's such a thing as a seller concession. So it doesn't count into the seller concession, the maximum, the high cost loan. Am I right there, Frank?
Yes, what Core's speaking to is regulations allow a seller to pay a certain percentage of a sale price towards the buyer's closing cost. It's called seller concession.
Yeah.
And that's historically always been a fixed number at either 3 or 6%, depending on the down payment of the buyer.
Yes.
So
if the seller wants to pay the buyer's agent's commission, as it was traditionally always done, but if they negotiate that, it is not held against the buyer in that 3 or 6% threshold. So the industry has allowed for the seller to continue to do that, and so far it really hasn't been an issue. But as you asked originally, Larry, and it was a great question, it has to be accounted for up front. It has to be discussed. It's not in the dark. Who's paying what and when?
Right.
And that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm. So, Jared, is that so? If I'm a broker and I've got a customer, but your listing says to be paid by the buyer, do you anticipate people not bringing their customers to those type of listings because there's really no benefit financially for them, or is that just splitting the profit between the listing agent a little less to bring that person along and compensating them out of their proceeds to get that sale done?
Larry, you are good. You are like reading my mind here of what I was wanted to jump in and say. So listen, as a buyer broker, no, I'm not going to advise you to not look at a home because they're not offering compensation. In fact, what was just alluded to is that we can still try to get creative. We can still try to write up an offer. Maybe it's just at a higher number. So the more interesting conversations that I'm having and the agents I work with who are having is with the seller. The seller is hearing this news and they're saying, so I don't have to pay a buyer broker commission, right? So I'm going to basically, I'm going to save X amount of dollars.
Right.
Well, you do not have to pay a buyer broker commission. However, let's talk about what's most beneficial. What's going to show your house in the best light? What's going to net you the most amount of money? What's going to bring you the strongest buyers? And that most people are just focused on that net number, right? What's getting you the most number? But overall, what are your strongest buyers? What's going to get you the best buyer? What's going to bring us to the closing table and net you as much money?
Right.
It's a net. If somebody says, "Here's my offer for $900,000," and you do not need to pay a buyer broker commission, I'll pay my broker, on my own. Great. But if someone's offered $50,000 more, and they're willing to pay, and they're asking you to pay whatever commission that equals $20,000-$25,000, you're earning more money.
Right.
So the seller would want to take that and pay the commission. The other conversation is, as you said, are there buyers who are not coming? Now, a buyer broker should be recommending that you still go, as I said, and look at things, and you can try and get creative with your offer.
Right.
But there are some buyers and there are some buyer brokers who are not coming to these homes, and that can be detrimental.
Right.
So it's good to have that flexibility. Now, the other question that comes up is, let's say the seller is willing to offer out buyer broker compensation. Because these are, for the most part, not listed in MLS, it becomes a conversation where the buyer's broker is asking us as a listing agent, is the seller willing to pay buyer broker commission?
Right. But
you can respond to that in a few different ways. You can say, yes, they're willing to pay X percent. Mm-hmm. Or you can say, yes, they are, write it into the offer, and we'll just look at all terms without telling them what that is. Or you can say, no. But if they are willing, it's really those first two options. Do you tell the buyer broker what that number is, or do you not? And there's a lot of agents who disagree on this right now. It's a healthy debate that I've had. At board meetings with the Greater Boston Association of Realtors. I've had this at a director level. I had this in my own team. And it's really interesting because people feel strongly. The truth of the matter is, as I said, we're a month and a half into this, not even. Mm-hmm. So I think this is going to be very interesting to see how it plays out.
Right.
But we're really looking probably 3 to 6 months at least
before you start to see how
on what the most effective
trickles in.
Practices
because
are. And then we're going to get into the spring market where it gets it picks up and the intensity picks up and things move fast, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, that's what I'm going to say. A couple of things, and it seems like it's a seller's market with the limited supply of inventory, that it puts the seller in more of the driver's seat. But then, like you said, the con to that is that if we start, even though there's a lot of inventory, but brokers aren't bringing people to my home, that's going to affect the traffic coming through there, and it may affect people having to go back in and readjust and allowing that to come out of their commission if they want to get the house sold. So you're right. It seems like it's in the infant stage, but it does seem to complicate a matter that's already complicated on its own. So Cora, also I want to, are you seeing more traffic now that the feds have lowered the interest rates? Are people now calling the money store more?
Yes, actually I get requests daily for pre-approval.
Yeah.
But of course, qualifying versus requesting are two different things, right? So yes, actually, and I'm also seeing listings that are there's price cut. Mm-hmm. So which means there are areas that are not, you can't really say it's a seller's market because there's price cut. Maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, maybe there's just something wrong with the house, or that's why it's not. But I'm seeing a few of my borrowers now who made an offer and got an accepted offer, like 2 out of 3 have a price cut. Or maybe it's just the location. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jared.
No, I think you're right, and I think that's it's more seasonal that we do see less buyers active right there. Like, it makes sense to me that you're saying you're taking more pre-approvals or pre-calls, that you're getting more calls to begin the process. And I think there's a lot of buyers I'm seeing out there at open houses, and it's showing, who are telling me they're at the beginning phases. They're learning the market. They're figuring out what towns. They're figuring out what they really like, their style, so they can be ready to go when there's more inventory, when there's more homes in the spring. The issue is that when there's more homes in the spring, there's also a lot more buyers who are active. But I think, Cora, pricing becomes so important, and I think I alluded to this earlier, Larry, that there are people who are pricing on the high side, not only because they're saying, hey, maybe someone can make a lower price, but you're looking at comps. Sometimes people look at comps of the past 3 months. Sometimes people look at comparable sales of the past 6 months. Sometimes they look back at a year to try to figure out the right value of your home. And if you're looking at 6 months ago, well, that's something that was in March. And you're in the heart of the spring market there. And that's when those bidding wars were getting wild. And what I always recommend, I try to remind clients, both buyers and sellers, when you're looking at a sale from 5 or 6 months ago, 4 months ago, when the market has shifted a little bit, is look at where that asking price was, not necessarily the closing price, the sale price, and it's somewhere in the middle, because we can't assume that you're going to get $200,000 over the asking price. I don't want to say they got lucky, but it was a different market and it's a different time now. So there is you've got to figure out what the mindset of buyers were at the time of that comparable sale.
So, folks, I want to pivot for a second, and I want to throw this out there to all three of you. So there's a bill pending at the State House in which the mayor of the city of Boston has sent in to increase, and she said temporary. I don't know. I've never seen a temporary tax increase on commercial real estate. If that is to go into effect, would that affect the market? Because it seems like the market is quite soft right now on commercial real estate. A lot of folks are allowing their employees to still work from home. Some are pushing back. I know Amazon is bringing in people back in, but Amazon kind of usually has their own property. So do you guys see a cooling off of the commercial loans, and also to you, Jared, the commercial real estate, people purchasing commercial real estate? Because some of that.
Personally, I focus on residential, but I do know a number of people in commercial, and absolutely, I don't want to say they're struggling, but it's definitely softer. It's definitely more challenging, and there's a fear of this for sure, of any taxes on this, because it's been that the commercial area has been a challenge now for quite a few years, and I mean, there's definitely concern and worry amongst people I know in the commercial real estate field.
And Frank and Cora, quickly, do you guys deal with commercial loans?
Yes.
No, well, I don't. I can't speak for Cora, but we're a residential lender. Specializing in residential homes.
Okay.
Yeah, but well, I have had requests, so I have to farm this out. Requests for commercial loans, and recently there has been a little bit of spike because of interest rates coming down. But I always refer them to the SBA.
Okay. Look, folks, we got to run, but can we get your contact? We'll start with you, Jared, for folks who want to get in touch with you, because this is always wipe your mouth. This is always an interesting and informative conversation that we have with you guys. If you could pass your information along for folks, and for Dr. Bradley, who wasn't
Jared, Jared, Wilk, WILK. I'd say the best ways are, you can always email me, Jared.Wilk, Jared.WILK @compass.com, COMPASS, and Instagram at the Shulkin Wilk Group, SHULKINWILK, the Shulkin Wilk Group on Instagram. Those are the best ways.
All right, thank you. And Frank, quick.
Well, my name is Frank Mancino. I am the executive vice president for the Money Store. I am here to support Cora Holbrook, who's our branch manager in Boston. I'll let her give her information to you, Larry.
And thank you guys for your sponsorship here. We really appreciate it, and this is why it's so important to get this information out. So, Cora, your contact information for?
It's 508-345-4726. Of course, email Cora Holbrook at themoneystore.com.
And if you want to be a proud sponsor of the broadcast here, like the Money Store, you can give us a call here, 617-282-0685. Folks, thank you so much for your time this morning. And we'd love to make this a regular segment, even quarterly or monthly, whatever your schedule allows, because every time you guys are on here, we get feedback from folks that are very positive, that they appreciate this information. And now with all these changes taking place, it's even vitally more important to have you here on a regular basis. Thank you, folks.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Jared. Appreciate you. Cora, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, Pastor, we'll grab that call right quick so they can call. I know you want to make an announcement. We want to sneak you in right quick. You got about 30 seconds. Still there, caller?
I'm not sure, but
Oh dear.
Did we lose it?
No, he's there.
Caller, you there?
Well, one of the things I like
Time?
to say that every time Cora comes in,
Okay.
one of the things I remember that she always said that I think is great is she always said, "Marry the property, but date the rate."
I like that. All right, you've been listening at the Roundtable with MAMLEO. Thank you for tuning in. Dr. Bradley, coming back to tell us what?
I'm good, man.
We're not going to be blessed this week. Be blessed.
Are we going for the evening? I thought we were.
Well, we can go the other hour if you want. Yeah.
Oh, no, I got to go.
Oh, okay.
Be blessed.
All right.
Be blessed. I'm sorry.
I'll take the blessing. Amen.
I thought we were going for.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah, no.
Home that you used to sell piffin'. You ain't gotta lie to me to sell me a track. You ain't gotta rock fake jewels or walk around strap. I respect artists getting money, but love them for spitting crack. And the fact that one track can move a family out the trap. It's a dream for us lost souls brought up in the mix. I'm motivated by the artists coming out in my midst. And the artists that paved the way when I didn't exist. Music's a skyscraper, I'm just trying to add a couple bricks.
This is for the dreamers. They say I am a dreamer. Cause I still believe that anything is possible as long as you work hard. Hustle real hard, hustle real hard. Hustle real hard, hustle so if I never see ya, never get the chance to meet ya, no, I came up from the bottom, always rooting for the